Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this next campaign diary for Rise of Tiamat. We are now in Chapter 3, and we have made it to the Tomb of Diderius, or Diderius, or however the heck you're supposed to say it. We are there, and we kind of only got to room number 6 in the entire dungeon crawl, so there's a lot more to do. There's a lot of things that happen in this campaign diary. I'm not sure if I want to go through every little thing. I have changed things up. When they got to Waterdeep, they spent about a good 2 hours in Waterdeep role-playing, finding things, looking for magic items, purchasing stuff, cleansing themselves at the table, introducing new NPCs that came into the story, cutting deals with Zaylan Maw with the dragon lance, the dragon arrow, and the information for Lucius's father. All kinds of stuff was going on during this time. And to kind of speed things up a little bit, I had a whole radio drama done. It was like what I call tone pieces. I've talked about this before. It only ran like maybe 2 minutes at the most, and it just highlighted their trip from Waterdeep to the Serpent Hills, and I did it with them riding griffins. That was just a lot of fun. It just kind of sped things up a little bit and allowed me to do some visual narrative through audio, of all things, which is more imaginative narrative, I should say, through audio, which I actually tend to do and like more than anything else. So they got on the griffins and they flew out there. We had that little thing. That'll be a separate video. It'll come out on its own just so you can hear it. Maybe if you want to use it, you can use it. But they got there and they got to the tent village and talked to a lot of people to figure out what the heck was going on. There was a confusion at first because nobody had seen Varram and this group of people come through. They just, like, the paladins weren't really paying attention. They're out in the frontier. They're setting up their fortress. They're keeping their eyes on for dragons and anything else that's coming this way. So they weren't quite aware of it. But of course, Bolo, I think his name is Bolo, in the tent, in the inn, actually had a lot of information on it. So they followed that information up into the Serpent Hills with a guide, and the guide left. He said, look, this is the Tomb of Diderius. It's cursed. There's all kinds of things going on. I'm not going any further. So they paid him and he left. And they encountered these guys, the automatons. As you can see, I changed them up. I wanted automatons, not simple statues that were just sitting out there. The automatons had just got done killing some of the cultists because the cultists decided not to answer the questions, but just attack. So I wanted to kind of foreshadow what could happen if you screw with these guys. And I played this as they walked up.
Stand where you are. You have come before Diderius, Feather Walker and conduit of clairvoyance. Behold ye now his wondrous triumphs. Diderius extends wisdom, and Diderius offers knowledge. Which do you seek?
So as you can see, they've got some tinker, almost like archaic kind of programming through crystals and whatnot. And there's actually 5 responses they can have. Maybe I'll put that in another video just so you can hear it all. But it was fun to do. It was fun to create those little voices and whatnot, speaking deep from within that steampunk metal. But they answered the question and they got through, and really everybody got past the statues. They found the trap in that hallway in part 6. Thimbraeus the thief found like the little alcove there, a little hatch behind the stones, and deactivated that trap. Everything kind of unfolded as it would in a dungeon crawl. They fought the Chimera in the mosaic tiles. The only thing was, when everybody was down, going through the hallway number 6, and Thimbraeus was deactivating the trap, well, Storm stayed behind and went back into the statue room. And there, he actually made himself stare at the statues. He wanted to see what would happen. And of course, the first time he did it, nothing happened, right? It's in a way anticlimactic in the book, but nothing really happened. But then he did it again. And this time, it kind of caused this bout of insanity. And of course, I took over his character, and his character was just going nuts and screaming and going all over the place. And eventually, long story short, Storm jumped down the well in I think it's area 5. And they were all trying to figure out what was going on because Storm was screaming his head off way back in the starting area and was running all over the place. And they ran after him, and he jumped down the well, and Thimbraeus jumped down there to follow him to hopefully put an end to this madness. And that's where we ended it. It was about a 5-hour session. Doesn't sound like much happened, but quite a bit did. Now, let's get into some DM thoughts about this. All right. First of all, here's some things I think went wrong in the adventure. I spent way too much time in Waterdeep. That's just my feeling. Perhaps the players are okay with that. But as a DM, I felt like if I was the editor of a movie, my pacing was off, okay? It turned out to be a little too easy to hang there for a little bit, and the adventure kind of stalled, in my opinion. Just things weren't moving along at a fast pace. Not that everything has to be at a fast pace, but we didn't need to spend that much time there. But there was just, I think, personally for me, some bad calls. I think story-wise, not rule-wise. We're usually pretty good on those things. But that's what happens, I think, sometimes when you're shooting from the hip, when you're improvising. Most time things go right. This time I felt like I kind of screwed up a few story elements. First of all, there was the deal between Zaylen Maw and Lucius. The deal was, you give me the arrow, the arrow that was given to the party in chapter 2 by what's-her-face, Maketh, okay? And I give you the location of where your father's been held by the cult, right? That was the original deal back in our last session. Well, for whatever the reason, I just didn't remember that. I don't know what happened. So much was going on that evening that Zaylen was kind of put in this uncomfortable position to give up more than what she really had. And it stumped me. It really did for a DM for a second. It stumped me. I mean, the players were watching me. I must have spent 4 minutes trying to figure out, what do I do? Because they wanted, the Yithriel went with them during this meeting to make the exchange, and she wanted a little bit more. And so, not thinking, I gave up her sword, Zaylen Maw's sword, in exchange. But you see, that was not the original deal, and I made a mistake there. Zaylen Maw should have been more adamant, saying, no, this is not what I agreed to. You give me the arrow, and I give you this information, because that's richness right there. Information is lucrative right now. It's more valuable than gold. That is the exchange, not here's the information, and here's my personal sword, and then I get the arrow. So I screwed that up, all right? As a DM, in the character's personality, I totally screwed that up, right? So I think there was a pacing issue. I screwed up a major beat in the story. It's fine. I still got the arrow, but now they're running around with this this really powerful sword, but the sword is sentient, so it's not even letting them draw it at this point. But during the tomb, I actually had Yithriel allowed to draw it, and she used it and was wielding it. And then, of course, after the game, I was like, why did I do that? That's not what's supposed to happen. So, another bad call on my point, and that's all since been corrected. We've actually talked about that. But so there was like this pacing and story calls that were just flat out bad. And then one thing that really hit me in the feels, like this just happens sometimes as a DM, right? I've kind of neglected Storm. I feel like some of his story has fallen out. The bottom's fallen out a little bit as things have pushed forward, because as things have gotten more complicated and more, we got more NPCs getting woven in, not some, just how the story's unfolding. So some elements of things, seeds that were planted all the way back to Holy Dragon Queen, have just been forgotten. And it upset me personally, right? Just as a DM, it hit me in the feels. I was like, oh my gosh, how did I let this happen? And, it's just one of those things. A lot of time passes, the stories get more complicated, and some things get left behind. I know no DM is perfect. It's not this kind of talk, but I hate it though. I hate it that these things had kind of been pushed aside, because because players begin to feel like they don't have a significance to the story, and that all the stuff they created, or at least their character, doesn't seem to have purpose, and they're not connected to it. I just wanted to be honest, things that happen. I think some people, not all, some people think I run this perfect game. Nope. I do my share of mistakes and bad calls. I try to run it the best I can, but these things happen. So, and I think a lot of things do happen mistakenly, and especially like my bad calls with story elements. Sometimes you don't see these things as a DM while you're doing it. It's after the game is over, it's like, oh wait, and then, by then it's too late. The damage has been done. But of course, as a DM, we can always go back and course correct. We learn from those mistakes, say, okay, not gonna do this again. I need to focus the spotlight here now. I need to change this up. And I've course corrected all of that stuff this past week and a half since we last played. So maybe this is a little bit longer campaign diary than it should be, but as a DM, look, just as honestly, just as I don't know, maybe it's a pep talk, or maybe it's a DM counseling session. It's going to be okay. You're going to make mistakes. The ball's going to be dropped sometimes, not because you've done it on purpose, but by accident. And just don't let that eat you alive. Just course correct and push on. You got to think of these things like patch notes for RPGs that are released on console and PC. This is the best analogy I can give it. You know, bugs show up, mistakes show up, and now we have to, as DMs, go in and patch all that up. You listen to the feedback and patch it all up and fix it. And when everybody comes back the next time, hey, the game is better, things are course corrected, and everybody's having a good time. So anyway, guys, that's it. Those are just some of my campaign diary stuff and the DM thoughts that I had about the campaign. And of course, now we're getting ready to play tomorrow for session 8. And, you know, we're still in the dungeon crawl, so it's going to be a lot more to unfold there as we push forward through this. So, and then we'll be taking another break. But anyway, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.